living rooms all across the nation, the world.
Charlie, I'm used to seeing you many hours a day, and this is the only time I see you anymore. So how are you? Good to see you.
I'm great. I feel like we need to talk more. Just a little check in once in a while. I feel like our friendship is fractured right now, and it hurts a little bit.
Well, there are benefits to being isolated. So
you're like, oh my God, he's not bothering.
Maybe a potential.
I don't think anyone's watching. Everyone's like, oh, that's
zero.
These guys are joking.
We ran them off last time. Come on, at least Hilbert. Come on, tell me Hilbert's here.
You guys aren't working. We know you're not. I guess we'll get started. People will listen to this at some point or not, whatever.
Wait a second. Amanda's not even watching? Oh, there he is. Okay.
Okay. There he is.
Yeah, there we go. We can just talk to Leif. It'll just be the three of us. Can we get him on the screen?
Leif, I'll send you a link. Okay, so yeah, we're in it here for another 30 minutes. Got some good questions kind of in the last week. Some things we've been thinking about as well. Steve's doing an absolute marathon because he just finished a training beta podcast that we're excited to hear. So look out for that here soon. Right when we left last time, David asked about the use and the experience that we have with blood flow restriction cuffs. So like the leg ones, the arm ones, right? We aren't here to give you any protocols on that, but we know a guy. His name is Dr. Tyler Nelson. His organization or his business is Camp 4 Human Performance. He is the guy to talk to. Blood flow restriction cuffs aren't necessarily new to the world of training. They're certainly new to climbers, I guess, in the last, say, year or two. But he's the guy that you're going to want to chat with, Dr. Tyler Nelson, Camp 4 Human Performance. I've used them once or twice. They make my arms and legs feel funny because they're wickedly pumped. But there's some really cool training modalities that people use for injury, rehab, and also for muscle hypertrophy. So like the actual build of muscle, say locally in the forearm, which we're mostly concerned about in our sport. So check him out, and he'll give you some answers there.
Yeah, I've used the BFR just experimentally. To me, I feel like it's one of these things that's in the 90%. It's like once I've maximized everything else in my training, that's an excellent thing to add in. Very much like many of the specialized resistance modes, worrying about how light your climbing rope is and all those sorts of things. I understand that there's value there, and I understand that there's an attraction to it. But for me, I'm just never hitting my training exactly enough to start really honing in on these very specific parts of things. But for people that are injured or have a lack of mobility in a joint, they can be a really useful thing. And I think Charlie's right to push people toward Tyler on that. He's actually doing a lot of courses right now, and you can go to his site, and the BFR course is quite reasonably priced, and I think you actually get a discount on the bands if you certify with him. And so that's kind of a double win there.
Yeah, Steve, we were kind of chatting before we got on, but we have a friend who was talking about maybe training around a tweaked back, and I think this is a pretty common thing for athletes, like pick up something wrong, or they've got a history of some lower back issues. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the tweaked back, it can be any number of things, but usually it has to do with loading under rotation, and that's when most people get like a low back pain in the lumbar. If it comes on suddenly and it's giving you shooting pain, it's probably something that's fairly acute, and it's going to resolve itself with just a diminished activity. You can still, like, if you're keen to keep your fingers strong or whatever, you could still do some hangs on a hangboard because you're in traction. You could still maybe use your tension block and pull on the block, under like just load against your foot. But for the most part, we don't want to just be like, oh, I'm just going to toughen it up and take some ibuprofen and train around it. once the pain subsides and normal movement is possible, but maybe you still feel it, the number one protocol is fast arm swinging walking. And so walking at a pace that you actually have to move your arms back and forth starts to reprogram that primitive pattern. And that is the number one prescription for relieving and preventing future low back pain. Beyond that, you can get into the Stu McGill stuff, and Stuart McGill is awesome. His probably the first book you should read is Back Mechanic, and it's really good treatment of rehabbing a bad back injury and then building strength on top of that again. And so once you're past the movement phase where you can go for these arm swinging walks, then I would go ahead and go into the strengthening that Stu McGill puts forth. The other resource is Alex Bridgewater. And Alex has done a lot of studying of low back pain, low back rehab. And if you guys have specific questions on that, you can email him at alex@climbstrong.com. And he's a climber that's dealt with back issues, and he's dealt with a lot of athletes with back issues. And so that's a good resource as well.
And I think I remember Steve telling me this a really long time ago, and this really relates to any sort of injury. The low back is really a challenging thing to work around because it hurts to tie your shoes sometimes if it's that bad of a tweak. But unless you, if you fell down or someone hit you in the back with something, it was probably something you did either in the moment in your training or throughout the weeks of training. It might have not been one certain lift, but it might have been accumulation of really bad lifts or really bad movement or a bunch of bad falls off a boulder or something like that that can attribute to that. So that's why the training log and kind of being able to look back through your training to see what made that happen. So you're not going to just keep dealing with this over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in really quick and answer Mike Campbell. He just dumped a question in here about the four-day accumulation cycle for max hang. I think that's an exceedingly bad idea. I just had a great talk with Tom Randall and Chris Hampton about scheduling and programming hard training. And one of the things that's really critical at this time is to look at your own training history and have you done 4 days of high intensity finger strength training in a row? Have you done anything that's overloading your system in that way? Then maybe is the answer. But the fact is even though you've taken away a lot of your potential activity with low intensity climbing, other activity approaching the crag and all these other things, you can't just replace minute for minute low intensity activity with super high intensity activity. And so I think you could use the 4-day accumulation cycle like we outlined in Unstoppable Force with max hangs involved, but they definitely can't be there for the entire cycle. You could do a strength cycle and then pepper those in 1 or 2 of those days, but otherwise I would stay totally away from that. I think the chance of, I think the result of this COVID isolation is going to be more finger injuries than gains in finger strength. And so a super low intensity long-term protocol is going to be the secret to that.
Yeah. Good question, Mike. Someone, where is it here, asked, I think Peter did on Facebook, asked a little bit about us covering strength imbalances between left and right arms. And of course, this also applies to the left and right leg. He was saying on the pinch block, I do about greater than 10% more with one hand and also see the same with some one arm negative work. And he asked, what are your thoughts on training the equal weights to reduce this imbalance, or should I keep training max on each side? And this is a great question. We work with athletes who ask this question and people in class all the time, because our ego wants us to use the max weight on our dominant side and then let the non-dominant side kind of lag on behind it. Our protocol, or what we suggest for athletes, is if it's somewhere around a 10 to 15% gap in your limbs, then it's probably fine. That's pretty standard as far as having a dominant side versus a non-dominant side. If it's much more than that, if we're creeping into like a 20%, a 25, a 30%, we've really got to see why you have that imbalance. You probably have a history of an injury with that limb, or there might be some sort of neurological or nerve issue that we'd probably, refer you out to someone way more important and smarter than us. But we do want athletes to train with the weight that their non-dominant hand allows. So say for your pinch block hang, you're doing like a wide 2x4 kind of pinch block hang, and your right side you can do 50 pounds, and your left side you can do 40. Stay on the same protocol, whatever you're doing, just use the same weight that your non-dominant hand is using. Don't keep making that imbalance even worse by training what your other hand can do. So again, I think you're probably right on track with most people. You're probably not that imbalanced. It might feel like it is a lot when you're doing these pinch block hangs, but you're probably just fine. Just don't make the imbalance worse by continuing to make that gap even more with doing different weights.
Chris Neeb up in Canada asked about suggesting speed climbing training during this time, and this is one that I hadn't dealt with yet. Chris is a youth national team coach up in Canada and does a lot of coaching of speed athletes up there. And so one of the things is we do not have access to the speed wall at this point. And so when we want to look at training speed climbers during this time, we want to look at systemic specificity, meaning the duration of their training should be similar in intensity and duration to what's going on the speed wall. Now, like when I'm climbing the speed wall, it takes about a little over 6 seconds for me to get to the top. Speed climbing is generally in the 6 to 12 second range for competitive speed climbers. And so the sets should be all out speed efforts of 6 to 12 seconds. Sprinting, stairs, really, really high repetition or high speed repetitions, like even speed push-ups for 12 seconds. Speed push-ups for 12 seconds. Going back and forth on those sorts of things, even though it's non-specific to the movement, the system is still being trained. It's really important that we keep the neurological function and the blood flow function of those muscles up. And so it can be really non-specific stuff. I think medicine ball slam, very, very quick. Box jumps, very, very quick. Single leg hopping upstairs, very quick. But staying in that realm of the proper duration, and then lots and lots of rests in between. They can also do probably some campus work, some hangboard work. The main thing will be to look at what that particular athlete has available to them and then build the program around that. Body weight is not going to be a problem. They are going to be able to continue to develop. And probably the biggest thing for your climbers is to let them know that they're not going to lose that much. Psychologically, the time off is probably more than it is hard on them physiologically.
Do you want to talk about our first time up a speed wall in Canada?
Oh yeah. Chris was the first time.
Did I even break it? And it wasn't.
I was just psyched to send. I sent the speed route, and that was all. And I think it was only a half speed wall, right? That we did.
Oh my god! I thought I was flying, and then I watched the video, and I was like, "Oh my god! I hope that doesn't make it on the internet." Let's see. I think Scott has an interesting question. He asked, "What is your opinion of fingertip pull-up?" I mean, they certainly won't hurt, but I think this goes into the same reason why we strength train or why we use weights or why we get out of the climbing gym to make our big muscles strong. You're going to fail on a fingertip pull-up because of your fingers, because of the small structure in here, before you fail in the big global version of the pull, right? Your lat, your shoulders, your upper back. And so I think a really good hangboard protocol with maybe some weighted pull-ups, or maybe you're doing inverted rows or some heavy dumbbell row, is going to serve you much better than just doing fingertip pull-ups. If someone's in a hotel and they don't have access to weights or they don't have access to anything, doing fingertip pull-ups on a secure trim above a door is just fine. But I think if you have access to other protocols or other equipment, you're better served by doing some real true hangboarding to make these strong, and then real pulling to make this strong, because you're just going to fail on your fingers first before you get into your lats.
Yeah, and I'd add to what Charlie said that training in different positions is okay, like lock off position, mid position, but you don't need to do a ton of pulling there. And sometimes that exacerbates elbow issues with people. It just depends on what happens to you personally.
I think our advice to Wade worked. It sounds like he is now equating his 16 Girl Scout cookies at one sitting now is like the smell of Jose Cuervo to him. So yeah, he's not going to eat any Girl Scout cookies anymore for the rest of the COVID-19 process. You're welcome, Wade.
Let's see. Eddie asked a question about the myotactic reflex being applied to climbing. The general idea with the myotactic reflex is there's a few different protocols for that, but the general idea is that you're catching and slowing down a load and then ballistically getting rid of it. Like you can drop the bench press to halfway through the range of motion and then try to reverse the direction and explode out of it. One of the things that's really interesting about it is that that's exactly what happens in hard bouldering. When we jump to a hold and then we'll catch and compress on that, that's the myotactic reflex being applied. Campus boarding is the myotactic reflex being applied. We don't need to enhance the negative aspect of it or the eccentric aspect of it, like dropping onto a hold and then exploding back up, because in climbing, the structure of the hands and the elbows tends to be the limiter rather than the muscles. The people that have had the most success with myotactics are people training like big muscle groups, chest, quads, glutes, and those don't tend to have the same weak tendon and joint structures that the hands and fingers do. And so I think the application is limited, but I don't think it's wrong to try a little bit of that. If you're doing some supplemental strength training and some squatting, that would be a wonderful thing to do. Now, if you don't really have a history of strength training, stick with the regular sets and reps. You don't need to get fancy with it. This kind of plays back into what we were talking about earlier. We don't need to be like, if you don't train regularly and you don't weight train regularly and you haven't really adapted to that stuff, this extra 10% stuff isn't going to matter. If you're a highly advanced strength athlete, yeah, let's try it out. But I wouldn't try to over apply it to climbing now, because you're already probably doing it with hard compression moves, campusing, and things like that.
And would you say, Steve, then for dumbing down a little bit of these like more big kind of phrases for training, like myotactic reflex, would you say that's more about like the ability to generate force to get to a hold, or is it staying on a hold? Like when climbers say contact strength.
Yeah, it would be the closest thing would be contact strength. The myotactic reflexes, like if we jump off a box and then jump back up, it's very much like plyometrics, in that the tendon structure and the actually now we're starting to learn the fascial structure takes part of the load, and the elasticity in there helps us generate load. But like I said, there's a ton of ways to do it that are less risky to build strength and power. And so for somebody that's he's clearly a fairly advanced athlete because he's asking about this stuff, I think it's worth wading into and experimenting with. But like if you're like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym and bench press for the first time, just do 3 sets of 5 and do that until you can't progress anymore.
Cool. Another question that came in from Chalk Up Performance Training, and this has kind of been a theme through all of our live posts, asking if we can talk a little bit about the benefits of cross training during the time and not focusing on climbing. I think it just goes like we've been saying. Some of you are like figuring out or trying to figure out what the heck to do because you've got like all these missed hours of climbing that you don't have anymore, like whether it's a full crag day or these big sessions in the gym, and again, you can only hang on your fingers for so long. You can only swing a quick kettlebell for so long. You can only do bodyweight push-ups for so long. I think doing some sort of version of cross training, whether that's like going for a run or a mountain bike, or some people are getting on their skis, all that's doing is just keeping like your general ability to move up. It's not gonna necessarily hurt your climbing, but it's also not gonna necessarily help your climbing. I think where people can get in trouble is trying to like go out for a super fast run to like mimic a really hard bouldering day. It's just not going to happen. They'll probably end up getting injured, and they're just in a completely different realm of sport that won't relate back to climbing. But I think getting out and like listening to an audiobook on tape or a podcast, or like catching up on phone calls and going out for a walk, or doing whatever you need to do mentally to stay psyched during this time and not being able to climb is really the true benefit there. Nothing that you're going to do is going to translate back into climbing, except for a little bit of like just some general fitness, not specific fitness for climbing. Do you agree, Steve?
Yeah, and I think it's a really great time to focus on limiting factors in your training. And so one of the things that happens is we'll have all of these factors in our training that limit us, like it's your aerobic capacity, or your mobility, or your flexibility, core strength. And it can be all these things that we don't quite have time to focus on while we're always getting ready to ascend, aren't we? Like all of us are like just on the verge. I just want to try my project one more time. We're not focusing on those things we need to do. Is my pressing strength bad? Are my legs weak? This is a great time to focus on other goals and other parts of your training. For example, if you don't have really tremendous upper body strength, maybe it's time to do a pull-up and push-up protocol. If your core tension isn't very good, maybe you can start working on lever progressions. Those are easy to do at home. Is your aerobic capacity up to snuff? Here's a really great test. And you guys have heard me talk about how running doesn't have direct value to endurance and climbing, but this is a great test. Can you do a 10K in less than an hour at a heart rate that's less than 180 minus your age? Okay. So for example, Charlie's 30. How old are you? 35, 34?
33. Come on.
Whatever. So just for the sake of my math skills, Charlie is 30. So 180 minus his age would be 150. So can he go out and run 10 kilometers in less than an hour at that heart rate? That's a very good indicator. If he can't do that, it's a good indicator that his aerobic threshold is too low, that his aerobic capacity is too low. And he could see big benefits in his general conditioning by improving that. And the way you improve that is to go out and spend as much time as you possibly can exercising in that realm of about 180 minus your age to about 10 below that. So Charlie's zone would be somewhere between 140 and 150 beats. And that can be hiking, it can be cycling, it can be skiing, it could be traversing on a bouldering wall. But the more time that you spend there and the more you develop that aerobic capacity, the better you're going to be at avoiding getting pumped rather than getting good at being pumped, which is usually how we train for endurance. So are you weak? Is your capacity bad? Is your mobility bad? This is a fabulous time to take those things and get rid of those limiters. And then when you come back, you're going to be way better off when you lead back into climbing.
And for most fit people, like if folks are doing the math in their head, right, that's 10 minutes a mile or maybe it's even a little bit less than that, 9 minutes and 56 seconds or whatever. That's not that hard. That's just like a little bit faster, like twice as fast as a really fast hike. If you're hiking really fast down the trail, that's right around 3 to 3.3 miles an hour. So most people should be able to do that. And if you've got that number, like Steve said, and you can keep your heart rate in that zone, you're fit enough, right? Like it's just like, we definitely talk about strength numbers in the hangboard or the deadlift or the press. If you hit a certain number or relatively close to that number, if you can bench press your body weight, you are strong enough. Yes, we can see those numbers go up. We can see some improvement. We can have you do that, the 6K or the 10 kilometers a little bit faster. But if you hit somewhere around that range, don't worry about it anymore. Just worry about keeping it somewhere in that like within arm's reach, not too far away. And then just stop, go to your next thing, go to some mobility thing, or go to some other thing that you lack in your training. And like Steve said, you're always pushing those little things to the back burner because you're always trying to send, or you've got some trip coming up, and we're all guilty of that. And now is the time to be able to do that thing. But don't get crazy and chase numbers because it's just like, oh, I can be better, I can be better. You just got to be fit enough for the sport that you've chosen.
Okay, it's time to wrap it up, my friend.
Yeah, so I think that was all the questions, actually. I'm pretty sure. We might have a couple for next week. What Steve and I want to mention, we'll post individual link for each of us. You'll see Steve and then Charlie, and then this backslash that says consult sale. What we're going to try this week, just for all you all, is to do on Friday, the 10th. We're going to do from noon to 2. Steve and I have 4 hours blocked out for 4 individual 30-minute consults, and we're going to have it all at a half price rate. So instead of $62.50 for 30 minutes, it's going to be $31.25. We're going to put that link there in the comments here. And so whoever, first come, first serve, whoever clicks on the link and fills up those 4 hours for us, you have us for 30 minutes. It's mostly really just a consult, talk about your training, talk about some things maybe you can work on, things you can think about for the future. It's not like giving you a training plan in 30 minutes. Trust me, you wouldn't want a training plan that only took 30 minutes. We just tell you to do burpees for 100 reps, and you wouldn't like that. But we'll put that up there, and then again, first come, first serve, and we'll see if people like it, we'll continue it and go from there.
Okay. Oh, look at that. We have 2 minutes left. We finished early, even after your public service announcement.
Yeah. What's your PSA for this week? What do you want to let people know?
I was shocked at how we're already on the 3rd week of this, and we did this in reaction to the COVID crisis. And so we're moving into that state of new normal for a lot of people. I think creating a good set of habits, including, time to go to sleep, time to wake up, eating well, those are going to be critical to your long-term, success in this crisis. And so if you haven't got that figured out and you still feel like discombobulated, your job this week is to get your act together, get a schedule for your training, for your eating, for the time with your family, get things figured out again, because this might be your normal for a lot longer than you want.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for the first couple of weeks, I was like, I don't really need to change my system. We're going to get back to normal here soon. And then it became very apparent that was not the case, and I needed to get my ass in gear. So that's a really good point. Yeah. All right. So I think we'll just wrap it up, and we'll see you all next week. Adios.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in.